talking to the guys from Midas Touch, and one of my favorites is Ron Filipkowski, who joins us right now. Ron, it is good to see you as always, my friend. How are you?
Doing good. Hanging in there. It's fall foliage season here in New England.
Yeah, that's for sure. Definitely a lot to get to. I want to start by getting your reaction to this Pam Bondi hearing. She won't answer any questions in regards to Tom Homan and this $50,000 duffel bag full of cash. She's very evasive on any Epstein questions. What did you make of this hearing this morning?
It was definitely unlike any congressional hearing I've seen before, especially a Senate hearing where things are supposed to be kind of more formal.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar to Kash Patel's, except I think she had a little bit. Kash Patel kind of kept getting handed talking points and notes on note cards from an assistant next to him when he had his hearing. Bondi didn't appear to need that. She had all of her talking points ready to go. Basically, her strategy was she had like a personal attack on each Democratic senator. Like Dick Blumenthal questioned her about something. Her response was about, him supposedly like saying he was a ranger in Vietnam when he wasn't. Adam Schiff, she talked about the fact that he got censored when he was in the House for nonsense. It was every single person. White House accepted a political donation from Reid Hoffman, who is apparently mentioned in the Epstein files. So that was her strategy. It was just like, I'm not going to answer any questions that you have about any of these issues, many of which are extremely important going on right now in the country. And I'm just going to attack you. I'm not going to answer anything about Epstein. I'm not going to answer anything about Homan. I'm not going to answer anything about the attacking boats in the Caribbean, blowing up boats. Basically, Adam Schiff did a good job of like at the end of the hearing going through each subject area that Bondi was asked about, and she refused to answer any questions at all. And at one point, he turned to the chairman, Grassley, who's 90 something years old, and is like, this is ridiculous. I mean, this is a Senate Judiciary Committee oversight hearing on the Department of Justice. She sat here in front of us for like 3 hours and refused to answer every single question. Like, what are we doing here? This is a joke.
I found it interesting, and you mentioned Kash Patel. If you remember when Eric Swalwell asked Kash Patel 6 or 7 times, did you tell Pam Bondi that Donald Trump is in the Epstein files? And 7 times he wouldn't answer the question. And you're right, very similar to the testimony today being put forth by Pam Bondi. It was just personal attacks on all the Democrats up there and totally evasive when it comes to Epstein. Do you feel like there will be a point where she will be forced to answer some of those questions, or do you think we'll never know?
Yeah, on a lot of the Epstein stuff, she just kept saying, ask Kash Patel. But then, you get Kash Patel in front of you and he says, ask Pam Bondi. So, this is their tactic, because Democrats don't control these committees in the House or the Senate. So if they did, these people would be hauled in front of Congress every other week, but right. They're not. And so, Democrats know you're going to get like 2 chances a year to question these people. And so when they just go in there and just obstruct and punt and point the finger somewhere else, they're easy to get away with this. I mean, like, for example, on the Homan thing, she wouldn't even answer, like, because the big question is, look, the FBI undercover agent gave Homan a bag of $50,000 in cash. So the question is, what happened to the money? Did they get the money back? Did Homan keep the money? If he kept the money, did he declare it on his tax returns, right? Because a lot of times when you get cash, you don't declare it. And so she wouldn't answer any of those questions. She just said, you're slandering Tom Homan. He's a fine gentleman, this kind of nonsense.
Right.
And it's like, can't we know if the ICE director is taking bribes? And then she kept saying, Kash Patel found there was no case. Well, okay, well, that's fine. We expect that, but we still want to know some of the facts from you. And she just said she didn't know anything. I mean, at one point she said she didn't know the answer to that question. So in other words, she has never had a discussion as Attorney General with anyone about whether Tom Homan kept that money. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
And she was also asked, right, Ron, would you be okay with a video being released so we can see on that video what may or may not have happened? And right, she wouldn't answer that question either.
No, she literally would not answer anything. It was, I mean, and they were like very serious. You know, the one Republican, I would encourage people, if you want to pull the clip from social media, the one Republican who kind of like was frustrated with her was John Kennedy.
Right.
You know, John Kennedy was like, look, you know, I kind of want to know these Epstein questions myself, you know, because look, the bottom line is, as we said before, there's plenty of Democrats implicated in Epstein. It goes both ways.
Sure.
But the Democrats are the only ones saying, bring it on. Like, we don't care. Like, if you hurt some of our people, that's fine. Let's get it all out. And Kennedy was kind of saying that. Kennedy is like, look, you know, we kind of need this stuff. What's going on here? Why aren't you being forthcoming? And he talked about Lutnick. You know, the interview that Howard Lutnick, Commerce Secretary, just gave, where he was next door neighbors with Epstein. He knew him. Epstein gave him a tour, showed him the massage room, the whole deal, and was going into a lot of details with a right-wing podcaster. And Kennedy's like, shouldn't you have talked to Lutnick about this? And then, you know, Bondi's like, I'm not really interested in doing that. And then he's like, well, maybe our committee needs to subpoena Lutnick then.
Yeah.
So at least there's one Republican who cares.
I agree. What's the point, though, of having these hearings when you have these people like the Pam Bondis and the Kash Patels that are not going to answer the most prevalent questions?
There's no point. It's just, it becomes a situation where like Democrats end up making speeches, you know, Bondi, you know, the witnesses, whoever they are, just insult whoever's asking the questions, and you get nothing done. You learn nothing. There's really no news. All there is just clips for TV and social media, and that's about it. So these hearings are no longer, you know, they're almost no longer interesting. They're kind of boring to watch, to be honest with you, especially if you kind of know what each person's going to say, because there's just no exchange. There's no back and forth. There's no question and answer anymore. The Trump administration officials have developed the strategy, all of them, that when they appear before Congress, they're going to say nothing about anything. And the only thing they're going to do is yell and scream and personally attack the person asking the question, which, you know, committee chairmen are not supposed to allow that to happen. They're supposed to stop witnesses. And that's, again, why it's so important for Democrats to at least win the House next year. So there will at least be some committees that do some oversight, where there are chairmen who say, you're not going to stop the witness. You're not going to do that. You need to answer this question. You know, yes or no. What is the answer to this question? And, you know, Republican chairmen are just simply not going to do that.
No chance they're going to do that. I agree with you. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Portland. You put out a tweet that I want to read because I think it's absolutely necessary to read this, because you're right. You said it's amazing how often right-wing independent journalists, quotations, become the story at whatever event they are covering. Nick Sortor, obviously, for example, and others that are out there, Cam Higbee and others. You're so right, Ron. They go out there and they become the story. Just, can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this. I've covered MAGA for so many years, and obviously you see this with them over and over again. Sortor he was in East Palestine way back with the train crash. You know, he was the first guy in there stirring up trouble, you know, and he went to Hawaii after the fires there and was causing problems there. And the people there were yelling and screaming at him, telling him, get out of here. So this is what he does. He shows up like North Carolina hurricane, Asheville, you know, he shows up at these disaster sites and tries to instigate issues. And of course, filming himself. And he's not the only one. I mean, there's been so many of these guys who have done it over the years. Their entire playbook, Benny Johnson is another one, is to go in there and create a confrontation and to provoke protesters from the left into fights, into yelling at them or spitting at them or pepper spraying them or whatever. And they'll grab their signs and they'll get in their face. And they're looking for that viral moment. You know, Alex Jones has his person that goes out. Laura Loomer has her person that goes out and starts these things. All these different little podcasts and networks have their people that go to these events and try to instigate things, because they're looking for that clip that hopefully, I mean, the home run is getting it on Fox News for a lot of these guys. And then, or getting Trump to retweet it. And then, using that as their justification of, hey, look at this chaos. It's chaos. It's war everywhere. We got to send in troops because, one idiot like Sortor is starting fights.
Kristi Noem is actually going to be, I'm sure you heard, is going to be out there today. And we're talking, Ron, about what, a half a block at most. And the right is making the claim that, Portland is burning down and it's under siege by Democrat terrorists. And I'm thinking to myself, listen, I've had people on the ground there that I've interviewed already. And we're talking about maybe a few hundred people. And we're talking about not even a half a block of Portland. What are they talking about?
Yeah, it's all right around the ICE building there, and that's where it's all happening. And yeah, I mean, she's going to go in there with who? With who? Benny Johnson, former on the payroll of the Russians to spread propaganda in the U.S. He's going to be there filming her just like he did in Illinois when I posted the viral clip of her not being allowed to go to the bathroom, where she tried to go to the bathroom in a municipal building and they told her, no, she can't use their bathroom, which, she had a big hissy fit and Benny's filming her on all that stuff. So yeah, I expect the usual stuff. They're going to look to create controversy, stir up nonsense. They're going to hope that protesters from the left do something as a provocation and that they can use. And that's why I have, Portland's always been a hot spot for a long time. Protesters in Portland are, they're pretty aggressive and they're very enthusiastic and they're very serious about their protests, and they have been for many, many years. And so Portland has always been on Trump's radar as far as like a lawless city, because it's very leftist and it's very, they don't like the federal government. They don't like Donald Trump. And so, that it's no surprise that is like the first city that he targeted to try and send troops in.
I agree with you. Not a surprise at all. I want to ask you, because you're someone who served this country honorably. And I know you get just as upset as anybody else when you hear Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump make these crazy speeches, in this case over the weekend, speaking to our brave men and women who serve in the Navy. What do you make of a guy like a Pete Hegseth, making these weird statements like, your diversity is not your strength? And then you have Donald Trump up there attacking Democrats for most of his speech. As someone like yourself, who's a hero who served this country, what do you think those people are thinking in their heads when they're forced to sit there and listen to this nonsense, this garbage?
Well, look, first of all, I'm definitely not a hero. I serve, but, definitely not a hero. But, I can tell you, like, the veterans that I know, who are not Trump supporters, this issue enrages them and enrages me probably more than almost anything that he does. Maybe more than anything. I mean, I can tell you, like, the first time when I was a Republican, and I was trying to give Trump a chance. I did not support him in the 2016 primary. I'm talking about going back to 2016. But I was trying to, like, be open-minded, and I don't like this guy, but I'll give him a chance. And then the McCain thing happened, where he ridiculed McCain for being a POW. Right. And that was it for me. Like, that was literally like, I'm done with this guy. I'm never voting for this guy. And I never did. Even as a Republican, twice I did not vote for him. And so, but when he gets in front of, this is a whole different ballgame. When you get in front of active duty troops as the president, as he has done multiple times now, and you use these inflammatory partisan political messages against your opponent and the opposition party, that has never been done before in American history. I mean, George Washington talked about not doing this. Eisenhower talked about presidents not doing this, because those people, the military is supposed to stay completely out of politics, completely. Have nothing to do with politics whatsoever. Don't talk about politics. I can tell you, because when I was in the Marines, of course, I was active in politics. I worked on political campaigns in my off-duty time. And whenever I would even start talking about politics with another Marine, my officers would tell me to stop and say, knock that off. Don't talk about, and I was talking about a Republican stuff,
Right.
don't talk that, we don't do that here.
Mhm.
I remember I was in during the 1988 presidential election.
Right.
And, I knew that my commanding officer was all in for George H.W. Bush against Mike Dukakis in that election, but he would not say a word. He would not say a word to us about it on who to vote for. I mean, the military has always been like that. So when Donald Trump gets up there and does this, and Hegseth too, this violates every fundamental rule of the United States military. Either party. I can tell you, if a Democrat did this in front of troops, I would be calling them out just as loudly. This is unacceptable.
It's absolutely disgusting.
And I can tell you why. It's because it's calculated. It's being done for a reason. It is because he intends to send these troops into U.S. cities and use them against Democrats. And he wants them because they're not comfortable with that. And he is conditioning them to be comfortable with that.
And he's telling them this would be training on the job. He's made those sorts of statements before. And do you really truly think he doesn't simply understand that that is not what these brave men and women have been trained to do? Do you think he really doesn't understand that, or is it that he just doesn't care?
I think, well, both. I mean, he definitely doesn't understand anything about the military. His idea of the military comes from, stories or whatever he sees in movies.
Right.
But, but no, it's he also doesn't care, because he and Hegseth talked about this too. Hegseth was asked by Fox, by Pete Ducey, do you think our greatest threat for the U.S. military over the next few years is China and Russia, or do you think it's internal, it's domestic in the United States? And Hegseth said internally, like he thinks the biggest problem is internal. This is their plan. I mean, they tried to do this in term one. They tried to use U.S. troops in American cities during the summer of 2020. And the problem is Milley pushed back. Before that, General Kelly pushed back. Mark Esper, Secretary of Defense, pushed back. And they all said, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. Literally everyone in his first administration, every time he tried to use troops on Americans, said no. And this time he made damn sure, when he brought in Hegseth and others, that there was not going to be anyone around him who would tell him no when he wanted to use troops. So this has always been something Donald Trump wanted to do.
The defense secretary, who has a tattoo on him, as you know, that says 100% white, telling all these brave men and women from, I would imagine, all different backgrounds, that diversity is not your strength. Did you ever think we would be a time in this country, Ron, where we'd have a defense secretary making a statement like that?
Listen, at the time that I was in the 80s, I would estimate that that 90% of the Marines certainly were Republican. But I don't think that is the case anymore by far. And the reason for that is because today, in today's military, there is a lot more women than there was back then. And there is a lot more minorities than there was back then. And so what that means is there's a lot more Democrats in the military.
Right.
It's a lot. I think it's now probably like 60-40. So when these guys say this to these people, you have to understand he's saying this to at least 30-40% of that audience is Democrats, those troops. And so, they're in a position where they are ordered to be there. They're forced to be there. And there's a lot of peer pressure on them to cheer. Contrast that, when he appeared in front of the generals and the admirals and he tried to do this, they sat there in stony silence. They did not applaud. They did not clap. They made it clear that they're not going to go for this bullshit. Those were the generals and the admirals. But then, I had hoped, okay, now that they showed the troops the example of how military is supposed to act in the face of partisan politics and how they're supposed to behave, I hope that the next time Trump did it with junior troops, that they would follow the example of their command. But they did not. It was extremely disappointing for me to see those junior troops, clap and applaud. Not all of them, but laugh and stuff like that. But I get it. They're 17, 18, 19-year-old kids. And,
right.
You got the president of the United States up there trying to, putting on a clown show. They got caught up in the moment, but it's very disappointing.
I guess on a lighter note, Ron, I guess you could call it that. Let's talk about Don Jr. here for a moment. You had posted an interview that he had done, and you're like, is this guy okay? First of all, weird twitching, weird sniffing, and he's like, his head looks like a bird. He's all over the place. What is wrong with Don Jr.? He did not look very well in the latest interview that he just did, and he's claiming that Fox News is anti his father. Like, what is he talking about? If they've been in his father's corner forever for 10 years, like what is he saying? He's angry.
The interview was last night, and I used to post all the Don Jr. clips. See, back when he was with Guilfoyle is when I think they used to party a lot, and they would always look strung out. And he would jump on. They had podcasts together. Hers was at 4 and his was at 6. So I would watch him like back to back. Hers I would watch for her outfits, because she would wear some of the craziest low cut, wild stuff. Not that I was trying to check her out, but I would like to, post pictures of her, right. And I thought that they were in it. She would sometimes say the wackiest stuff. And then he would come on, and I'd mostly just check to see if he's on something, check his eyes, listen to. So I'd listen for like 10 seconds, and then I'd know like, oh, he's fine today. And I just, bug out. But sometimes you can tell, like, as soon as you see his face, oh man, this he's loaded, so most likely I'll say, I don't know for sure.
Right.
So, but after they broke up, I think Don's been kind of like on his best behavior. And I think two things, like his dad got elected president, and they split up with Kim. He's got a new girlfriend. So I've noticed like he's been kind of like not as bad as he was back then. But then I saw last night on Newsmax, and as soon as I saw his face, I'm like, oh man, his eyes were lit up all red. And of course, as soon as I started listening to it, I'm like, this guy's out of his mind, because you could tell he talks so fast. He talks fast normally, but there are times when he talks like, we've all, I think, been at parties with people that are on coke or whatever.
Of course.
And they won't stop, they won't leave you alone. That's him. And so he's on Newsmax, and what Newsmax loves to do with the Trumps is to get them to shit talk Fox, And so when Trump over the weekend posted a thing where he was ranting about Mark Kelly, the Arizona senator, was on Fox on Sunday talking about the shutdown, and Trump was all pissed off that they were even having a Democrat on. He thinks it's disloyal to him if they have a Democrat on. So of course Newsmax seizes on that, because they're in competition with Fox. That's their main competitor.
Of course. Yep.
And he's like, didn't what your dad said, don't you think Fox is terrible? Don't you agree with us? And of course Junior takes the bait and just starts ranting and raving about how terrible Fox is, how he doesn't watch it anymore, and how they don't invite him on anymore. And of course the Newsmax host is just loving it. This is exactly what he wanted. But for me, like, just the way he was talking and how geeked out he was, and you can even watch his mouth and stuff, he wasn't right last night, put it that way.
I'm not sure he's ever right. Ron, before I let you go, what do you got going on your Substack today? What are you working on?
Yeah, that hearing with Bondi. I'm going to say one more thing too about Epstein. Sure. Because I'm working on summing up everything that happened with Bondi, but a lot of the stuff that it talked about with the pardon. So Trump was asked last night, are you going to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell? Right.
Right.
And he, of course, what would be the normal answer you would expect? Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. Any politician,
maybe I will.
Notorious,
look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the most notorious child sex traffickers. And he said, well, I don't know. I'm thinking about it. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to consider it. I'm looking at it, which of course is like a baffling answer to most people. How can you say as a president that you're even considering pardoning her? So what I'm going to say is this, because, the guys were talking about it last night. Is he going to do it? And I said, look, this is the game that Trump is playing. Trump is a master manipulator. That's his superpower. His one superpower, the one thing he's great at, is he understands how to identify weaknesses in people and how to manipulate those weaknesses. Right. And so what he said, when he says that, he's doing that very calculated way. He is not going to pardon Maxwell. He never will pardon Maxwell, but he will also never say never. He wants her to think that there's a chance. He wants her. That was a direct message to her. He's saying, I'm considering it. I'm thinking about it, because what does that do? That keeps her on her best behavior. She is the one who can nuke him. She is the one who can throw him under the bus anytime she wants. She has the goods on him. But, they moved her to this minimum security club fed, and now Trump is dangling out there the possibility of a pardon that virtually guarantees that she's going to keep her mouth shut. As long as she thinks there's a chance she could get a pardon, she will never talk. And so Trump is going to continue to do this. Watch, every time he is asked about this, whether it's next year or 2 years from now, he's going to say, I'm still thinking about it.
That's such a good point. I didn't even, it's funny. I didn't even think about that, but you're absolutely right. The reason why he won't say yes or no is to kind of dangle it in front of her. You're right. So she's quote unquote on her best behavior. It makes complete sense to me. And yeah, I agree with you. I don't think she's going to get a pardon. I certainly don't think so, but I guess you never know, but I certainly doubt it. Can't wait to read your Substack today, Ron. You do a great job. Always appreciate you taking the time to come on, my friend. Thank you so much.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Take it easy. That's Ron Filipkowski from Midas Touch joining us. Always love having Ron Filipkowski on.